Hey, I had a thought, you two. Yep, yep. Where do we get thoughts from in the first place? What? Oh, we get them from a thing called the brain. But you wouldn't know anything about that because only people who have one can know what I'm talking about, so. Ha! Says you who puts metal in the microwave. That happened once, okay? No, but you guys hear me out. Where do we get thoughts from in the first place? Like, we have a thought, and then we continue to contemplate on that thought, or proceed to take action regarding that thought. But we never think where that thought initially came from and how it just sprung up in our mind. Because that thought always gets overpowered by the fundamental completion of the thought or its contemplating that we go through. But we never think about the thought of how the thought initially came into our brain. Yeah, well, he's right. Because even for that, you'd have to think where the thought came from in the first place, and that'll result in another thought. Because you're having a thought about the thought that you're currently thinking about, but that doesn't make any sense because that's just the thoughts then. And now you're thinking about the thought of having a thought of having a thought. So basically, you're thinking about thinking of thinking. What the? You are too. We always think about the thought that has a tangible consequence, but never about how that thought that leads to the tangible consequence occurs in the first place. And even that thought is a thought. And even thinking about the thought of a thought is a thought. And even thinking about the thought of a thought of a thought is a thought. And if you think about a thought, of having a thought, of having a thought, of having a thought, then you're just having a thought about having a thought about having a thought about having a thought about having a thought. Then you're just creating an endless loophole of thoughts with no conclusion, other than the one you just created with the tangible thought. So the thought about having a thought about having a thought about having a thought about having a thought is inconceivable. And even if it was conceivable, you'd have to think about that as well. Ultimately leading into having a thought about a thought about a thought about a thought about having a thought about having a thought. Oh my god. You know, I finally get the saying now. What saying? Henry Ford once said, thinking is the hardest thing to do, which is probably why so few engage in it. Now I know why. They just prevent having a thought of 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 having a thought. Whooey! Wait, but if you think about it, the people that are preventing themselves from thinking are ultimately thinking because they're having a thought of not thinking a thought, which ultimately is a thought of a thought. Oh my god!